Greetings, science fiction and fantasy enthusiasts. Do you read books? Do you watch films? Do you hate deodorant? Then welcome to our podcast. You're listening to No Deodorant in Outer Space with Ryan Sean O'Reilly. Now, let's get started.
I'll stare the bastard in the face as he screams to God, and I'll laugh harder when he whimpers like a baby. And when his eyes go dead, the hell I send him to will seem like heaven after what I've done to him. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and welcome to another edition of No Deodorant in Outer Space. My name is Ryan Sean O'Reilly, and I will be ferrying you across the River Styx as we enter into uncharted territory for another faithful edition of our podcast. Joining me on this episode, we have a new guest, a purported fan of the podcast. We didn't know that they existed. His name is Rob Lloyd.
Hi.
Is that correct?
I'm Rob. That's correct.
All right. First try. Very challenging name. Yeah. Rob, just so our audience can get like a little bit more familiar with you, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself in the sense that what is your interest in science fiction, fantasy, horror? Do you have any favorite authors, directors, books, or movies, or anything like that?
Yeah, so I'm big into comic books. One of the things that really got me into comic books in the first place was the Alien and Predator comic books through Dark Horse.
Oh, interesting.
Which I got into through the movies. The Alien and Predator movies, I've been a big fan of those for a long time. I also am big into Stephen King and just comic books in general. I'm a huge Batman dork. But all that sort of comes together into any kind of real pop culture that I dig.
Cool. Do you have any like favorite Batman artists? Or writers or whatever?
I really enjoyed the Scott Snyder run. I thought the Grant Morrison run was really good. The current King run is really good. I enjoyed... Do
you still follow the comic?
I haven't in a couple of years, but I try to keep up to date. Okay. The King comics that's the recent run that he's been on that has been phenomenal. They've had a good 8 or 9 year run.
Cool. And Stephen King is always a favorite on this podcast for many people.
Pretty solid.
Sitting to your left, looking directly at me, is another fan favorite, returning champion, David Wilkinson.
There's a lot of disdain in that.
There's no disdain.
I just felt like, just real quick about Rob. I've known Rob since, I don't know, I was probably 4 and he was like 0.
That's factually correct.
Yeah, our families were very good friends. We did the same church growing up, and then
your old church buddies.
Yep. Then we got reacquainted. We had lunch a few years ago, or in Ann Arbor, and I think I had a few beers at lunch. We had a really good time, and I realized I'd be friends with him if I hadn't known him my whole life. So that was kind of cool. Unlike you, no, I kid. Yes, but I actually really like all of you guys here a lot. I forgot I was going to. Oh, Rob. I kind of want to do a plug here for, not even a friend, but like, you mentioned comics. There's a great comic book store in Michigan, Vault of Midnight.
Yeah.
And that's, and Rob kind of turned me on to them, and I get all my comics from them, and then you can get subscriptions from there, and they have a podcast as well, but a little shout out to them because they do supply us with all our comic needs. What am I talking about here? Oh, by the way, I loved your opening quote. I don't want to say for once, but that actually was one of the better lines. I love that line. I love Frank Miller. I really, what am I supposed to say right now?
Nothing. We already know who you are.
Okay, yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
No, but I pulled that off of Goodreads. I usually look on Goodreads for popular quotes and then pick one that I feel fits. You were on another episode this season. You did Altered States with Dustin Harnish from My Decline.
Yes.
And now you're back. You had another podcast, How to Avoid Murder and Other Awkward Situations, which is no longer running?
Yes and no. The problem with How to Avoid Murder, I did it with Laura, who's been on the podcast before, and we have a child together. We hang out a lot.
Yeah, we did the Clive Barker episode with your wife.
Yeah, she's a huge horror fan, and she, I'm a huge crime fan. So we kind of combined our interests and did a podcast about true crime and ways people could avoid being murdered. What happened, unfortunately, is we got a lot of reach out to us from people that were involved in the actual crimes. There's about 10 different occurrences from people that were in jail with people or victims or family members. And it really had a very negative effect on me personally. I don't want to speak for Laura, but like I like to exist in the realm of fiction. I don't want to do anything that I feel is going to hurt people in real life. And so I felt like even making light or jokes about it, which I couldn't help. I mean, I can help but do, but part of the fun of the podcast was you're talking about it. if the thought of it creating pain for people that have been through it really was too much for me, I didn't want to deal with that anymore, and Laura felt the same way. And then we got some actual death threats, directly and indirectly,
that sucks.
From a few people that claimed, that they were talking to people that were in prison that we done podcasts on, they were going to get out, and they were going to come after us, and they were going to help them do that. And so we didn't really, I don't know, it ceased being fun for us. We had quite a lot of listeners and success with it, but there was a big emotional toll. And I did a lot of research on, way more research than I do in this podcast. No offense, but no, but I would I'd go to libraries.
Spoiler alert.
well, for this podcast, I try and be organic, and people may hate that or love that. I like to read and react and watch and react, and I don't overthink it. But when I'm doing an actual crime file, my personal background, I want to get all the facts. I'm obsessed. I hear a news story and I always go okay, this crime happened, but I'm going to go get the police report. I'm going to pull the docket and the court case. I'm going to read the law, the jury instructions. I'm going to get every angle so I can discuss this nuanced crime with people at the cocktail party, and they all hate me and walk away after 5 minutes. I'm actually, that guy. But so I put that level of work, and then there was some crimes that I had been following, there's the one in Illinois, the Brown's Chicken Massacre, which always creeped me out. There was the Hmong shooting in Wisconsin and Minnesota.
Yeah, you covered all those.
Which those are things that I just remember happening in my lifetime, and I wanted to cover them. And there was the satanic ritual killing in California, and I really kind of did a lot of work, and I got feedback on all those things from people that were involved in them. And I just for my sense of humor, what I want to do, I can't be super serious on a podcast. I want to make crack jokes and have fun, but the subject matter wasn't one that I felt comfortable doing because people are listening, and if anything horrible happened to me, I wouldn't want some jackass making light of it. And the thought of monetizing it or going forward with it just seemed, I don't know, bad karma, so to speak. And again,
it was also a family project, you and your wife doing it. And,
right. So. And Laura was really weirded out by a few things too, and she was just she got really kind of bummed out reading about real murders all the time too. And so what we want to do is,
I've had nights where I've stayed up watching unsolved mysteries or true crime stuff late into the night. You watch a couple of those in a row by yourself, and then you end up thinking the world is up. It really skews your perception of the world. It does.
And I worked in law enforcement for about 2 years, and I remember talking to you, Ryan, when I was doing that. I was really depressed. I didn't want to go to work.
You're a prosecutor.
Yeah. Prosecutor. But just dealing with that level of crime and dealing with the victims and seeing what happened, and every day I'd go to work thinking, oh Jesus Christ, what the fuck is going to happen today? Not in a wacky kind of way,
it wasn't real zany at the prosecutor's office.
No, it's what dead baby picture am I going to look at today? We investigate suicides and infanicides, and I had to go to autopsies and deal with sex crimes of children, and it really, I don't know. It wasn't my cup of tea. And I'm glad there's people out there that love doing it. I'm still friends with people that do it, but it's just not my thing. I like happy endings for in real life for people. That's what I focus on.
So would you say that not doing the podcast was a good way to avoid awkward situations and murder?
Possibly my own. Yeah.
Well, that actually segues nicely into our topic at hand for this podcast. We are going to be covering Sin City, written by Frank Miller, the comic book series, graphic novels, as well as the 2 movie adaptions, Sin City and A Dame to Kill For. That was the sequel. Let's segue into that, and we'll kind of go around the room right now, and all of us will give sort of a 1-sentence summary to just kind of preview our thoughts on the novels, the books, the comic books. So I'll start things off. I've got a quote that I prepared that Wilk used to always make fun of me for making me sound like I wasn't doing it off the cuff, because I'm literally not doing it off the cuff.
You're not. No,
but
you're country mouse. I'm city mouse.
So, all right, I'm going to. This is my quote. It's a little bit longer than I normally do, but imagine getting punched in the gut by some rogue lunatic underworld gladiator who promptly collapses into your kitchen chair and chomps down on a bowl of Cheerios with his oversized mitts as you crouch on the floor, stunned and drooling blood. There's a knock on the door, and you pick up your corpse of a body to stare through the peephole at a knife-wielding, leather-clad dame grimacing while rare classic cars skid onto the scene, followed by screaming cop sirens, tolling in debauchery and corruption. Then the color drops out, and real nice everything goes noir. So that's my quote.
Beautiful.
Well, let's go to you next. Just like a quick summary of what your thoughts are in the book.
My summary is Sin City was a juxtaposition of provocation with expectation, meaning that if you walk into a room with a hard-on, instead of fucking someone, it's going to get cut off. And that...
Okay.
Well, it would...
I don't want to gloss over that, but let's gloss over that.
Vice was not rewarded, but it was celebrated at the same time. So every story, every sequence would bring up things that were, again, provocative, but the reaction to them, the ultimate ending would be one of violence and dismay for an antagonist. And the treatment of woman in the novel, I thought was, in the comics and the movie, I thought was particularly interesting. It wasn't quite misogynistic, but it kind of was, but it kind of wasn't.
All right, let's leave things there.
Okay.
You said a lot of the interesting stuff that we can get to. Rob, what about you? Just like a quick summary of your take on the graphic novels.
So, Sin City is a hard-boiled environment where everything you do has an intense consequence, and everyone is pushed to their very limit.
Very true. Very true. That's you were the most successful of all of us in coming out with being like cutting down your thoughts to a single sentence. So I like that.
I didn't mention castration though.
So
you succeeded in that.
Castration.
Wilk, you never failed to disappoint. Oh, wait, no, you never
disappoint to fail.
No, that's right. You never failed to disappoint. All right. So the graphic novels were written by one genius man, Frank Miller. He was born in January 27th, 1957.
Not a bad use of the word genius in this context.
Yeah.
So
he's still alive today as of the recording of this podcast. So I'm just going to go and do a little bio about the author, and you guys can jump in as you see fit. So he was born an Irish Catholic. He was fifth of 7 children. His mother was a nurse. His father was a carpenter, much like Jesus. He was born in Maryland and grew up in Vermont. When he was younger, he used to go around playing Tarzan, which was, predictor of later in life when he wrote Master Assassins of Mars Part 3, which was a John Carter story, which we actually covered John Carter of Mars on this podcast in an earlier season.
Did we cover the author of Tarzan at all?
Yeah.
We did. Okay.
Yeah, Edgar Rice Burroughs.
There we go.
We always cover the author in the book. And
no, I just remember. I didn't remember if we did the guy that wrote Tarzan was one of them.
Yeah, the same guy that did John Carter.
Yes,
yeah,
got it.
So he also grew up on 14 acres. He didn't consider himself being coddled. His mother was a former combat nurse, and I remember him telling a story in some interviews or some article that I read that if he fell over and skinned his knee, his mom would just kind of patch him up and send him back out there to go play. He also grew up loving movies. He liked detective stories like Mickey Spillane, Raymond Chandler, Dashiell Hammett, and like the Cagney and Bogart movies. He was also fond of a film called Battle of Thermopylae, which was about the Spartans, which was important later in his life. He ran the school newspaper when he was younger in high school. As far as his career is concerned, he moved to New York in about 1976, which is, I think that's a pretty tough time for the city of New York, the 70s. But his dad was supportive and I think helped him move out there. He really wanted to get into comics. That was his thing. So he found some side work to support himself while he was trying to do the comic thing. And he ended up doing carpentry, hanging doors for someone. He worked in this building for this guy who turned out to be a cocaine dealer. And Frank Miller said, I think literally one day the mafia showed up with guns and forced him out at gunpoint.
Yeah.
So welcome to New York.
Maybe we'll sit later tonight at our hotel.
Yeah. Yeah, we'll say that Dave and Rob drove all the way down here to my abode and are staying in a nearby hotel/motel.
Yeah, hotel might be, that might be too strong a word for it.
You're in the Hell's Kitchen of...
Yeah.
To quote Rob, "Hey, Dave, there's a Ford Explorer with 2 flat tires and it's full of garbage." Yep, yeah, there is. This is on me.
And Rob, didn't you say there's some kind of curious stain on the floor?
Yeah, there's something that is probably a blood stain on the floor.
It's definitely blood.
It's definitely blood.
It's absolutely blood.
Yeah, there was definitely an undercover cop that got murdered in that room, last week, probably maybe Tuesday, I would think, maybe Tuesday, Wednesday.
We'll hope that you guys survive.
It's good though because we're getting some recording for posterity before we die.
Yeah, so this is for the ages now.
Laura, I've always loved you.
also for the ages is The Twilight Zone, which was one of Miller's first gigs. Was he got a 3-page story called Royal Feast in the licensed comic of The Twilight Zone. So he got that idea got that gig by befriending Neil Adams, who was a actual Batman artist that he was fond of.
Stellar run. Some of the best art.
Was it?
Oh, yeah.
I'm not familiar with Neil Adams.
What was the era of that?
I want to say it was the 80s.
80s? Okay.
It was.
He got into the New York at 78, so it's around that time, shortly after.
Good, solid stories. It's considered some of the better Batman stuff. The art is fantastic in particular. It's very realistic.
Miller couldn't say enough nice things about Neil Adams. Like, I guess Neil Adams, it was him or another guy, but I thought it was Neil Adams would, like, kind of like, people would, like, aspiring comic book writers and drawers would just, like, hang out, and he would just, like, give them feedback on their work. Yeah. And he would often tell Miller that his work sucked. But Miller just kept going there, and he wasn't discouraged by it. And I think Miller tells a story about how, like, people tell him comic books are on their way out. You should just go back and pump gas back where you're from. Like, this is not a good industry to get into because there was a downturn. I think he said things turned around when they shifted the market to a direct market. I don't know if that's when they started opening comic book stores solely instead of just like drugstores and things.
Yeah, that long term that was a bad idea, but that's when it started. Yeah, because now Diamond is the company that distributes all the comics, and so they have a corner on the market, and it's not good for the comic book retailers.
I did not know that.
Oh, well, maybe that saved them at the time, and now it's another game. Well, it's a whole new game.
And not to, I mean, I love comic book art, but I really, and I don't know if it was him or not, but I have all the Batman anthologies. But like in the late 70s and 80s, the art took a more realistic shift. I feel like
he's a big piece of that.
You know, and the shadowing, it went from like that classic like Dick Tracy stuff to like a much more, for lack of a better phrase, graphic novel-esque art, where it was more horsescape, I'd say. But like I love the Batman art in the late 70s and 80s, and I guess it's probably him then.
Yeah, a more realistic turn and got a little darker. Yeah, for sure.
So Miller's first job that Neil Adams, Neil Adams, I guess, said, "Now you got something." When he would actually put tracing paper on Miller's work, I think, and show him what he was doing wrong. There's actually a story that Miller tells in a lot of his interviews where he showed up with his portfolio bound with baling twine that he would have got from home, and he stayed in such a crappy place that while he was like sitting there talking to someone about his comics, like in a kind of interview setting, like a cockroach scuttled out of his papers, and he had to grab it and like hold on to it while he was talking. So he was dedicated and motivated and kept up with it. His first job, Neil Adams got him, was with Western Publishing. They had Gold Key Comics imprint. I don't know if that was like War Stories or something. I don't know what he did, but the first notable thing is The Twilight Zone, which he was not actually credited for. Following that, in the early 1980s, he made his way to Marvel and started working on Spectacular Spider-Man, which featured a failing Daredevil. So Daredevil, the superhero, was not doing well for Marvel, and they were considering making him bi-monthly. And I guess that was sort of the kiss of death. If they switched him to I don't know if it was like monthly or whatever to bi-monthly, then that means like they just thought he was not profitable and he was on his way out. So while he was there, Miller saw an opportunity for himself, and he asked his mentor, Joe Duffy, to put in a word for him with the editor, Jim Shooter, the editor-in-chief, and to see if he could work on Daredevil. I guess they probably figured they had nothing to lose since Daredevil was not doing well for them.
Very smart of him. Very shrewd.
I'm pretty sure Daredevil had popped up in some of those Amazing Spider-Man
books.
Right,
yeah, that's how they think he got exposed to Daredevil. Well, he probably knew Daredevil already, but yeah, it was on the Spider-Mans that he worked on. Mm-hmm. I guess Shooter was keen on the idea and made him a penciler. He debuted on a finale of an ongoing story that already existed, but that didn't actually fix the comic. So a new editor came in, I have Denny O'Neil as that, and who was impressed with Miller's own backup story, and he decided to use Miller not only as a penciler, but also as a writer for the series as well. The sales rose in about 3 issues from Miller taking over. While he was there, he introduced sort of a ninja mercenary character, Elektra, who eventually had her own movie in 2005. So he created that character. Are you familiar with that character?
Yeah. She's always sort of been a love interest for him. I think, if I'm right, she ended up...
like a femme fatale?
Very like an assassin, murderous,
but like
martial
good
artist.
sometimes and sometimes bad, confusing.
I think the best way is to describe it in his own words, where he said she's an assassin and a terrible bad guy who just feels bad about being a bad guy. So they had a very complex relationship, and that's sort of part of what he brought to that, is that these superheroes, their lives became super even outside of just their super acts. Their entire life was over the top. Like, their relationships were over the top. Where they lived and what they did in their free time, everything was over the top. Yeah.
Who played her in the movie? Was that Jennifer Gardner?
It was.
Yes.
And did she marry Ben Affleck?
Yes.
And didn't Ben Affleck play Daredevil eventually?
Yes. He played Daredevil in the movie that corresponded, I think.
Okay.
Considered one of the worst comic movies of all time.
Terrible.
Yeah. Although he's like a fan of comics,
Green
right?
Lantern might be worse.
Yeah,
yes, he's a huge comic
Yeah,
book
but
fan.
he keeps ruining the movies. He's not a good actor in a lot of cases. He's not a bad director, but he should play certain roles.
Yeah.
Like Matt Damon's friend.
Yes. He's very, very good at playing Matt Damon's friend.
Yes, or like a frat boy with a quasi heart of gold, but a bad marriage. That's
or a high school senior who wants to do nothing but paddle freshmen in the butt with wooden paddles.
Yeah, he's just kind of a dick, I think.
Yeah,
and
I think you're right.
In real life?
Well, I probably would have a beer with him because of,
I would too.
Yeah.
Talk about music and sports.
How lucky
movies.
for Ben.
yeah.
But he fucked his nanny. I mean, that's why I got divorced. He was fucking the nanny.
Yeah.
It's like a Jude Law type thing.
What are you going to do?
Don't fuck the nanny. That's kind of a dick move.
Right. I mean, I guess fucking the nanny's probably a bad idea generally for your
just
relationship.
doesn't-
Especially when you're married to Jennifer Garner. But at the same time, I mean...
Of all the people that fuck, don't fuck. I mean, it's just like it's a bad. If you're gonna fuck someone else's nanny. Have like some kind of
she's
nanny
on the
exchange
payroll.
program.
That's solid life advice from Dave Wilkinson.
Go to Matt Damon's house. Fuck Matt
fuck
Damon's nanny.
maid.
Yeah,
That makes way more sense.
A whole lot more sense.
All right.
No one's
All right,
talking about
gentlemen.
it.
We took it left there.
All right. Nannies aside, what also Miller brought to the comic is he added a martial arts fighting aspect to Daredevil. He created an early mentor named Stick.
Yep.
And there was a leader of the ninja clan, the Chaste, and then there was a rival clan called the Hand. So this would later inspire the creator of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in creating that comic. Who I think their mentor was Splinter.
Yeah.
And then wasn't there also the Hand?
The foot.
The foot.
And the origin story is directly related. So Matt Murdock becomes blind as a child because of a car accident where a chemical spills onto him. And it's the same mutagen that, if you play the whole thing out, it's the same mutagen that drips into the sewer and down to the turtles that creates the mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah, because their creator loved
Yeah,
Daredevil.
they were such a fan of that.
So that was like
What was that guy's name?
It was
Do you know?
it was a tribute
I
then.
can't remember off the top of my head.
But so it was
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was
I know-
respectful.
Was TMNT? Cause I played full nerd exposure. My first exposure to TMNT was a role playing game in the '80s. Where I played them in a role playing game at my buddy's house.
Must have been that's right at their creation because they're like late 80s.
Right, no, he had an older brother, and so he had the teenage. It was right before the cartoon came out, like probably a year before the cartoon came out. This is like probably in '85 or '86.
It's an early jump.
Oh yeah, and so we were big into D&D, but his brother, my buddy had a brother who was 4 years older than him, and he was way into D&D. So we'd go to his house, play D&D. He's like, "Hey, I got a new game, TMNT. What? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?" I'm like, oh, that's fucking awesome. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yeah, and so we played the whole game, built characters, and then a year later the cartoon came out, and that was it. So I never knew what the inception was. That originally a comic book?
Yeah. So the guys
created
were
by Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird.
Yeah, they made it at a bar on bar napkins because they were so excited talking about
Daredevil.
Yeah, Daredevil.
I still think it's one of the better, fresher ideas that came out. I mean, it was
huge.
It was a great. As a kid, I loved it. I still love it as an adult.
It speaks to what a huge game changer that this Daredevil run was, because it was vastly different than anything else that had come before it. Light years different. The characters, the depth, everything wasn't so black and white. It wasn't the good guy saves the day. He had to make tough choices, and it really
classic Frank Miller.
Yeah.
He eventually chose to kill off the Elektra character, although I think they brought her back and resurrected her.
Nobody's dead from
nerd. It's nerd rules,
but
nobody ever really dies.
It was a tough story, but a journalist noted that the skyline he drew when he depicted like Hell's Kitchen neighborhood, where I think Miller lived at various points, was reminiscent of German expressionism. It had like very dramatic edges and shadows and stuff. And that reminds me of an episode covered on the podcast earlier this season called Metropolis, where the director of that film took a visit to New York and was very inspired there, and came back and did these amazing set designs for that film. using German expressionism elements. And that was all based on his own experience of New York. So that was an interesting tie-in.
It's pretty sweet. You see some of that too in the later Batman run that I'm sure we'll get into in a minute, but some of those sharp edges, and even in Sin City you see a lot of that.
Cool. After that, he did a 4-comic miniseries on Wolverine and expanded the character, and that was a critical success.
Was that the movie that the Wolverine was based on?
To be honest with you, I'm not sure.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know about that.
Did it take place in Japan? Do we know or not?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know.
Sorry.
After that...
I don't know either.
After that, he did Ronin, which was his own creation, and he did a six-issue title through DC. That was a big success for him, and that was his own thing. And I think that was like a crazy thing with ninjas and robots.
Futuristic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have not read that.
I guess it was very popular. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Around this time, his wife said that he had gotten robbed like 3 times in a month, and he was starting to think about moving to L.A. because he was getting stressed out about it. But Ronin came out of this. In 1986, he did a 4-issue miniseries as a writer and penciler for Batman. And he got the idea to do this because he was, I think, 29 and he was going to turn 30, and Batman was perpetually 29 in the comic books, and it was freaking him out that he was going to be older than Batman.
So it's probably of note that Batman was his that's what got him into comic books.
Well, Neil Adams was a Batman artist, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he was like one of his mentors.
Yeah. So when he was young, he went into like a dime store or whatever and saw a comic book and picked it up, and it happened to be a Batman comic, and dived into it, and that's what got him into comic books in the first place.
Yeah, I think he was afraid to take on Batman right away because he thought Batman was too big for him.
He needed to hone his skill. I respect that about him. He wants to make sure he's good at what he does before he does what he really wants to do.
Why is Batman like just so beloved though? I mean, me too. I'm guilty of it. Batman's probably my favorite character
because he doesn't have like superhero powers, right?
Yeah, because he's so the everyman who he overcomes diversity. He
adversary. He doesn't overcome diversity.
He overcomes
he
something.
He hates minorities. He overcomes diversity.
Whatever.
Sorry.
Sure. So anyway, yeah, great. I had a good point. Now it's gone.
No, you did. No, go on. I'm serious.
I fucking can't now because it's lost. Anyway, Batman's fucking sweet because he's just a regular dude who just has a problem and throws money at it until it goes away.
Well, and the problem is like every other comic book. I love comic books, I love fantasy, but like. Batman to me is the standard, and like there's no hero that speaks to me more than Batman. It's this idea of like the man that has everything put all on the line to fight crime and evil, and then like what Frank Miller did with Batman. I mean that's why I'm here right now. I love the Dark Knight series a lot.
This is going to take everything to a Batman turn, which is okay by me, but
yeah, that's fine.
So what can you tell me? So when I talk to you about Superman, right? You know who Clark Kent is. You know he's like he's kind of a bumbling guy who.
Yeah, in some aspects, yeah.
What can you tell me about Bruce Wayne other than he has a lot of money and he dates a lot of women?
Well, that's the problem. Who is Bruce Wayne?
Exactly. So the difference to me is that Batman is the actual man and Bruce Wayne is the alter ego versus Superman, where Superman is the hero and then Clark Kent is.
And Batman is an actual philosophy.
Yeah.
He has an actual ethos that is different than everything else, where to do no harm, not to quote Google, but he will not become a criminal.
Right. He's not willing to kill anybody.
Not willing to kill anyone. But I think, and again, that to me is just the most, I mean, like, and really the Joker's opposite, the Joker's sole reason to exist is to get the Batman to kill him. Yeah. Which makes, to me, okay, in all honesty, the Joker is my favorite character in comic history.
He's too sweet.
But you can't have the Joker without Batman.
And you can't have Batman without the Joker.
No, and that really
Joker
is the marriage.
So to bring us back to the podcast, that's interesting because when you start looking at Frank Miller's The Dark Knight series, that's when you start to get some of that darker Batman who is getting closer to crossing that line.
Right.
Mm. And I feel like...
Well, he starts it off with Batman being 55 years old, which Frank said at the time that might as well have been 75 because he was 29, so he thought 55 was real old.
Right.
But this is Batman returning to fight crime after retiring because the second Robin died, I believe. So it's already a grittier, darker Batman. He's not, I don't think, rippling with muscles. He's more aged and stuff.
So it's interesting because
and he copied the term Dark Knight. Actually, that term existed before him. Someone else used the Dark Knight Detective, I think he was called, or something like that.
Yeah, it's one of those terms that's been thrown around with Batman for a long time.
Yeah.
But the art in there is interesting because Batman is huge. He's but that's sort of his style. It's that same Goonie drawing that you see of the guys in Sin City. Like, he's just big brick fists and huge shoulders, blocky head.
Yeah.
Scarred up face, the whole deal.
And so this was a huge breakthrough for Miller.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, even though he was already successful, this was very, very popular. And obviously, we know later on they made movies of that with Christian Bale. He returned to Daredevil, doing, among other things, an arc focusing on the character's Catholic background and the ruin and rebirth of his real-life identity at the hands of Kingpin. And he also returned to Elektra, doing an 8-issue miniseries called Elektra Assassin and he did this for Epic Comics, and that was about cyborgs and ninjas and further expanding her backstory. And then he went back to Batman in 1987 and did Year One, which is a retelling of the character's origin story, and he did this to kind of fit in with his Dark Knight art. And I guess that became an original animated series.
Yeah, which is very good.
Is that with Mark Hamill as the Joker?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I've heard about that. I should watch that.
Mark Hamill actually does the Joker for all the Batman animated stuff.
Yeah, I heard he does a really good job.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker.
Yeah, the Year One stuff is very good.
Yeah, I've heard that was really awesome too.
I almost brought it.
Have you seen it, Wilk?
I haven't. No, the book itself. I mean, I have problems with the Batman animated series. I'm not sure which ones are the good ones.
Oh,
there's a lot. There's a lot out there.
So the Batman animated series is the TV show, and it's awesome.
I watched it live when it was on.
Yeah,
back in the
me
day.
too.
But I feel like there's so many cartoons available on certain things right now. I haven't actually sat down and rewatched any of them
right
at this point. But I don't
even think that's in. I don't even know where that would be.
Well, and they did the Killing Joke recently.
Yeah, which was terrible.
I haven't seen it, so it was terrible.
How's
it terrible?
That's Alan Moore.
What?
Yes, Alan Moore did. Yeah, wrote The Killing Joke.
Who's the author of The Watchmen, who we covered on the podcast.
So The Killing Joke itself is amazing. The cartoon that they did, like the movie, the animated movie, there's some stuff in there that's like.
How did they fuck that up?
Well, Batman fucks Batgirl, so that's a problem.
Well, that is a problem. How is there fucking in that story?
Oh, I'm pretty sure it got an R rating. There's a big rape scene with the Joker. They play that whole thing out. But
there's no. Okay, I mean, it's sexually provocative. That's my word of the day. But there was no rape in the Killing Joke.
Oh yeah, Joker it's implied that the Joker rapes Batgirl.
Is it
when
really?
He shoots her in the spine? Yeah.
But I didn't get that out of it. But I mean, I've had the comic for 20 years, so forgive me. Maybe I was more innocent.
Let's not get too into Killing Joke. That's another topic.
I could talk about Batman until the end of time. So
well, we'll talk about it later.
Yeah. Yes, we will.
Yes.
So after he did Year One, he was inspired. One of the things I want to say is he was inspired by Japanese manga, and he was particularly inspired by, I think it's Lone Wolf and Cub.
Yeah.
I've never seen those. Have you?
I haven't read it either, but I hear good things. People that I trust about these kind of things that's one of the books that they swear by.
Yeah, he, I guess, redid some covers for those so that they could be brought over to the English market. But I've heard him describe reading those, and he didn't even speak the language, but he could follow them just based on the artwork, and he just loved them, and he wanted to combine those with, I think, European influences as well for his own stuff. Around this time, there was a proposal to do a rating system for comics, and DC, I guess, embraced this, and that pissed off Alan Moore, and as well as Frank Miller, and they were people that spoke out against it. And Miller went so far as to say he wouldn't work with DC. They continued to do this, and he pledged that he was going to do his future work with indie publisher Dark Horse.
So the Comic Code had been around forever, and they were starting to get away from it. And some Marvel Max, I think, was the banner that had broken out. And there were a couple other places, some of those independent stuff, the Image comics that started coming out, and I think Dark Horse 2 started to get away from that, where they were not getting the little stamp or whatever, and everybody's trying to and essentially it was
an actual like a stamp on the comic.
It was like a little thing in the corner that was like the
it's like some kind of seal of approval for parents.
And so and it said that this is, and there was all kinds of stuff that it was crazy. Like you can't have police committing crimes in books, and you can't have
there was
vampires
an actual,
or witches or something.
Was there an actual panel people would go to get approval?
Yeah.
You read Cavalier and Clay, that novel?
No,
it's pretty cool. About the Golden Age of comics.
Yeah.
Sorry,
I forget. Oh, you know who? I was hearing someone talk about. It was the people who ran Archie Comics ran the comic book code panel that would approve things.
That makes sense.
Oh, Archie Comics are all over the fucking place right now, though. I mean,
they're awesome now, though.
Now. Right. We have dark Archie Comics all throughout my house.
Yeah, Archie versus Predator.
Well, yeah, no. And my girls, they all love Archie. Laura loves Archie. I mean, they watch the Riverdale show.
Jughead's a werewolf, I think, at this point.
Oh, yeah. And there's all kinds of shit going on.
Yeah.
So, after all that, he did a final Elektra work for Marvel,
Nice.
which was colored by his longtime partner, Lynn Varley, who, he marries at some point. And that was called Electra Lives Again. And that was an erection, or not an erection.
It's an erection.
It's a resurrection story.
I would imagine that probably had something to do with it.
Electra came back. So that brings us into the 90s. And you got Frank Miller doing a series called Hard Boiled, which mixed violence and satire. And then he did some work with a series about Martha Washington, which was a miniseries and also involved a sequel that was about an African-American woman in modern and near-future Southern North America. That was drawn by Dave Gibbons, who did The Watchmen.
Funny story about those. My mom gave me those because she got a library science degree and she had a class on graphic novels. And when I was like 13 or 14, she gave me those to read because she thought they were very good and they were awesome. At least to me when I was that young. I don't remember much about them, but I do remember really enjoying them.
Yeah, I heard those were good too. So around this time, he gets courted by Hollywood. He writes a rap song for the 1991 Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 2 movie, The Secret of the Ooze. But he also gets pulled in to do scripts for the sequels to RoboCop, which was, I think, directed originally by Paul Verhoeven, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who we covered on this podcast when we did
Total Recall.
No, but he also did Starship Troopers.
All right, yeah.
But so Frank Miller gets pulled into Hollywood. He does scripts for RoboCop 2 and RoboCop 3. This ends up being a real bad experience. I don't know how many years he was involved with doing this, but he has this analogy where he talks about being a writer for a movie is like being a fire hydrant, and there's just like a line of dogs like getting ready to piss on you. And he's just like, it's a director's medium, which everyone knows, and it doesn't matter, like, whatever you write, it's just like everyone else is gonna be able to do stuff to it. And so it was just an awful experience for him. He didn't like it. Although I think there was comics turned into that came out of some of those movies that he did, but he just had a bad experience. He didn't like it, and he kind of swore off Hollywood. He comes back and he decides that he's going to write something different, and that's when he does the Sin City books. So
I didn't see anything about this specifically in my research, but the RoboCop comic books were under Dark Horse.
Yeah, I don't know if
I wonder if there's a connection there at all. I don't know.
I don't know if he did them, but I think they were based on his scripts.
Okay.
He might have been a little bit involved with some of them, but I thought other people did them.
I don't know if it's the second or the third one, but I could see it's very Frank Miller-esque, especially Sin City-esque, where they there was a crazy drug called Nuke that was going around, and like, and there was a kid who was in charge of it, and like, I didn't know Frank Miller was behind that, but I actually kind of see the bones of the story being very Frank Miller-esque, then it just getting, taken to like an orgy and fucked in every hole by producers and directors. And
did he do a version of The Punisher?
Did he?
I don't think he ever did The Punisher.
Oh, okay.
I might be wrong.
I feel like who hasn't done the fucking Punisher at this point?
It seems like it would be right in his wheelhouse.
It wasn't in my research, but I remember seeing an old Punisher movie.
The Punisher.
Oh, the movie?
Yeah,
I don't think so.
Okay.
Yeah, there've been a couple. The Dolph Lundgren one,
maybe.
The Punisher is super appealing. The whole mythos behind the character,
dude,
but like
the Punisher sucks.
Well, I don't.
I like the new Netflix version.
No, I'm saying
yes, that's good. But
what sucks about? I'm saying the idea behind the Punisher sucks, but it's been done like probably 6 times, hasn't it?
Well, let's say so. There's
like
the Jane version, the Dolph Lundgren version. The TV thing for Netflix.
Well, there was a one after Thomas Jane too, wasn't there?
Yeah, and then the most recent one with I can't think of who.
Some martial artist or wrestler or somebody like that. It was like some big meathead.
Yeah, I can totally picture him, but I can't think of who it was.
Thomas Jane wasn't mean enough. I mean, he wasn't really into it.
No, the whole thing is.
No,
it's been a mess. The problem with the Punisher is there's no depth to the character, and you can only go on a straight revenge. So the guy makes a career out of going on a revenge quest, right? But then once you get that revenge, there's nothing else to do, and it's a comic book character who we've already established will live forever. So there's no depth there. There's nothing else to him.
Well, how's that different than Batman, though?
What?
Isn't Batman the same, though?
No, Batman's trying to stop crime in general. He's not doing a revenge plot.
But the motivation's the same. I mean, it's
No, it's not.
Batman's trying to stop that murder from happening to anyone else. Punisher's trying to avenge the murder of his wife.
No, I'm saying, but they're both acting out of a sense of loss. Batman, they both lost people due to crime.
But Batman wasn't avenging his parents' death.
Yeah, and Batman's not killing people either.
But the Punisher, to Rob's point, he's not avenging his family's death after a certain point. He's just perpetually going on punishing criminals. by bringing them to justice or killing them.
Yeah.
Batman's perpetually bringing criminals to justice. He's not killing them. I'm just saying their motivation and the ends are kind of...
Yeah, I get what you're saying. There's more intricacy to Batman than there is to the Punisher.
Well, I agree. But
those are two established series, right? And Punisher's pretty gritty.
Yeah.
Which takes us back to Frank Miller, who is down on his luck, I guess, is from Hollywood.
You're good with that reel.
He comes back from that and decides to do something different. And that's when he comes up with Sin City. This is first serialized in Dark Horse Presents, which was a huge success, and eventually they released it in trade paperback. He eventually told more stories. He was living in Los Angeles at the time, and that's what kind of influenced the series. It's very noir influenced. It was done in black and white with spare colors. His quote that I saw about this was that people are attempting to bring a superficial reality to superheroes, which is rather stupid. They work best as the flamboyant fantasies they are. I mean, these are characters that are broad and big. I don't need to see sweat patches under Superman's arms. I want to see him fly. So he brings like a realism, but he also wants to see the extremes. It seems like that was like his goal and ended up being very successful. So we'll get into Sin City more in a minute. But after that, he goes back to Daredevil, does an origin story there. He does Spawn and Batman, which I think was a big success. There's a crossover for Image Comics.
Such a Frank Miller. Spawn versus Batman. We're going to get together and we're going to fight, and then we're going to figure out that we're trying to do the same thing, and then we're going to straighten ourselves out and work together.
After that, he does Big Guy and Rusty Boy the Robot, which was a 2-part miniseries that became an animated series on Fox Kids. He also founded Legend Comic, which was an imprint of Dark Horse. And then he does 300, which is based on the Battle of Thermopylae, which was a favorite movie of his growing up. And that's actually historical. It's an historical picture or piece.
Loosely.
Well, but he based it on a true event. It wasn't just created whole cloth. I guess there's some criticism over it, but he was inspired by that old movie and decided to do that. And that was a very big success. And that his wife did a lot of the painted colors on that. And it's all based on the perspective of Leonidas of Sparta, and eventually became a 2007 movie directed by Zack Snyder, who did the Watchmen movie, which we talked about.
Bless you. And the Batman, or the Dawn of Justice, or whatever, too. And Justice League.
Yeah. So going into the 2000s and thereafter, Miller moves back from LA to Hell's Kitchen. He goes back to Batman, does Batman Strikes Again, or he's working on that. Then 9/11 happens. And his wife said he was deeply affected by this, and sort of she thought he sort of had like a PTSD effect because he was like living there at the time. And he also did Batman and a version of Batman called All-Star Batman and Robin the Boy Wonder series, which I think was not well received. And I think he starts to go into this kind of decline. But around this time in 2005, he does the Sin City movie, which was a great success. He did that with Rodriguez, which we'll get into in the next episode. But that was huge. But his personal life seems to take a turn here with all this success, because he also ends up separating and divorcing from Varley, who had done the color for his works in Ronin and 300, among others. And she had a quote that I thought was interesting. She said that Frank became even more famous than before, and he was exposed to a kind of celebrity he'd never experienced. Varley says it was really distracting. You don't want to come home to Hell's Kitchen and just draw pictures. It seems like a letdown. And then he's got the Snyder movie for 300 coming out, which is more success. In 2008, he decides to do his own solo directing project because he co-directed Sin City with Rodriguez. We'll talk about that. But he had a favorite comic growing up called The Spirit, and he turned that into a movie.
That was a hot bag of garbage.
Yeah, it did not do well.
So that's based on Will Eisner's
The Spirit.
Yeah, which is a seminal book. Will Eisner is a legend in that's who the Eisner Awards are named after. Yeah. I mean, and The Spirit is, you actually can feel some of the Sin City, and you can feel some of the spirit in Sin City, specifically with some of that black and white and some of the art and some of the coloring in the movies. You can tell that that's definitely where they drew some inspiration from, for sure.
So he gets divorced. He starts dating a Shakespearean scholar, Kimberly Halliburton. He ends up getting sued by a former executive coordinator. So he's got some legal problems. And then in San Diego Comic-Con in 2011, he's promoting Holy Terror, which I think wasn't that originally supposed to be a Batman thing. And then DC didn't go for it. So he took off the ears of the Batman.
And the ears off Catwoman.
Yeah. And
It was like post 9/11. It was really
like
really
anti-Islamic or something.
Yeah, and everybody had kind of calmed down and come to their senses a little bit. And he still
and so DC
pushed
didn't want to put it out, but he decided to.
Yeah.
So he ends up getting a lot of flack for that. He also makes some comments against Occupy Wall Street. That draws the ear of Alan Moore, who was a big supporter of his, and then basically is like, yeah, I don't follow Frank anymore after Sin City, and some of his stuff that's coming out is homophobic and misogynistic. So Frank starts kind of running into like a PR nightmare.
Oh, Alan Moore's kind of a nutcase, too. So.
Well, he's his own thing.
Yeah.
But Miller eventually backs off his volatile comments that he said, and he said that, you know, he doesn't really necessarily want to wipe out chapters of his own life, but he doesn't think he's capable of doing that kind of book again. I found an interesting article on The Guardian where they interviewed Miller, and they also interviewed Neil Adams, his early mentor. And there was some quotes in there I wanted to pull out that Neil Adams said. I'll put a link on the website about it, but Neil Adams said that about Miller. We just talked about the work, and if you don't teach family or good health to somebody, and then suddenly you turn around and go, oh my God, we didn't have that conversation, and you feel like shit because Frank didn't, and now he's having to learn it. You cannot accept other people's view of you. You cannot believe when other people say, oh my God, you're great, you're a legend. You cannot accept that. It's no way to live. And as soon as you do, you start convincing yourself, and you're something you're not, that somehow you can drink 2 bottles of whiskey and nothing will happen to you. I told him he was white trash, and I'd be surprised if he makes it for 6 months because he's taken his life and ruined it. And he said, well, I'd like to show, and Frank said, I'd like to show you I'm not that way. And I said, if you recover, I'll see you in 6 months, maybe a year. Adams basically thought of him as a son. And I guess Miller was going through some difficult times, and he kind of confronted him about it. I think Miller does pull himself through that. He eventually in 2014 puts together or is involved with the Sin City sequel, which we'll talk about. He goes back to Batman, does Dark Knight 3, the Master Race.
Which was awful.
Was it? I think
it was bad.
It was a top seller, though.
Yeah, well, of course. I mean, It's Frank Miller on a Batman book. And it's the third, I mean...
It completes like a trilogy, sort of.
Yeah, but it was not good.
He does get into the Eisner Hall of Fame award in 2015, and he also started working on Batman Year One in 2017. I don't know if has that come out? Or no, Superman Year One, excuse me.
Yeah, I haven't seen it.
Well, the latest with him is that he worked on a young adult novel with another author about King Arthur from the point of view of the Lady in the Lake, and Netflix bought 10 episodes of that. Mm. He's working on a new graphic novel for Xerxes, which would be a prequel to 300. And it's also very rumored that he's got some health issues going on. His physical appearance and stuff, he looks kind of like distressed. I don't think he's publicly said what's going on, but people suspect that he might have some kind of serious health problem. So I don't know. I didn't see anything about that. But very interesting guy. And he's done a lot, and he's made a huge impact, and he's had his ups and his downs.
Seminal. I mean, he changed the comic book game for sure.
Yeah. I think Wilk was it you or was it Rob who was telling me, like, the 90s is sort of like Miller. He was all over the 90s.
Yep. He paved the way for people like Seth MacFarlane and Rob Liefeld to come through, and Jim Lee to come through and really get some of that more aggressive comic book stuff that really pushed them through the 90s, which was kind of a bleak time for comic books, and held held comic books afloat until we could get into some of the better writing that's currently going on. Mm. But some of that, I mean, that high level aggression, that bigger than life persona, that kind of stuff is really what defined the 90s in comic books. And that came from Frank Miller and other places, but he played a large role in that.
Cool. All right. Well, that pretty much concludes the bio portion here of the podcast. Pretty detailed, but the guy's done a lot. So is there any more beer over there? I was going to grab a little more beer.
I was wondering the same thing.
There's 2 empty things of beer here.
Oh, there's another bottle. Let me go get it.
It's probably a good idea.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah, that's definitely a good idea.
So we're going to talk about Sin City, which originally came out from Dark Horse in 1991, and then it came out years later. On this episode, we're going to talk about, I think it's five books. We're going to talk about Volume 1, which is called The Hard Goodbye, Volume 2, A Dame to Kill For, Volume 3, The Big Fat Kill, Volume 4, The Yellow Bastard, and then Volume 6, Booze, Broads, and Bullets. Wilk, you used to be good at this. if you could summarize these 5 books in like a real succinct way, how would you summarize them? I mean, there's different characters, there's different arcs and storylines, and then they interweave and all. It gets a little bit complicated, but it's not so complicated. But how would you summarize the overall arching tale?
Crime only pays if you're virtuous.
That's spot on.
Yeah, I mean,
these are crime
yeah.
detective comics,
Mm-hmm.
which is what he loved.
He doesn't view. I love crime, and he doesn't view crime as being inherently sinful or a vice. Mm-hmm. He views criminality as a necessary mechanism to take care of the ills in society, and at the same time to take care of other more vehement criminality. And we have heroes here who are heroic because of their criminal actions against other criminals. And
there's a quote from Miller that he talked about the Rolling Stones song "Sympathy for the Devil," where all the cops are sinners and all the sinners saints.
Yeah,
and that kind of almost summarizes what he was trying to do with the series.
One of the most fascinating pieces to me is the art and how everything is black and white, but within the story and the characters, nothing is black and white. Everything is gray. There's no. In a way, there's certainly this guy versus this guy, right? And in that you have the black and white, but in the morality of it, everything is gray. There's nothing that's good or bad in any particular thing. It is literally about what happens in each particular scene to each particular character and what they do. And the actions in particular are never really made to feel.
I think he said he liked the morality of the detective stories, but he wanted to take interesting characters and put them in difficult situations. Like he wanted, the prostitute that would, do something good, or, you've got all the characters in here are pretty much flawed.
Yeah. But that's the thing is that so I guess the morality is there, right? But the roles of who they are and what they do is that gray area where but they're not superheroes trying to stop crime. Right.
Because the cops are, there's some cops that are less corrupt or whatever that try to do good, but you've also got people that are purportedly bad guys, but they're trying to do something good among all the strife and badness.
I mean, I think if you live in that world, in our world right now, you see a lot of there's a higher rate of domestic violence amongst law enforcement than there is against non-law enforcement, and people that live in criminality, whether they're fighting forward or against it, tend to you live by the sword, you die by the sword, and I think it showcases that a police officer can be corrupt or he can be a hero. A prostitute can be corrupt or can be a hero, however you want to view it. But different people do heroic things for the betterment of the characters in the story, regardless of their assigned role at the beginning.
Can you think of an example in any of the books where there's a civilian who suffers a terrible fate?
Like a true innocent?
Yeah.
Not on camera or on book.
What about
Yellow Bastard?
What about Nancy Callahan? She's like a child, so she's innocent.
Okay.
She becomes a stripper as an adult.
She doesn't die, though.
Huh?
But
she's not killed,
but he
though.
saves her.
He saves her from Rourke Jr.
Right, she never suffers short of being kidnapped. But she does nothing. She doesn't die. She doesn't lose any body parts. Nothing. He protects her from anything bad happening. So I don't. I mean, I understand that they're sure trauma, but I don't know if trauma really affects anyone in these particular books. And seeing that, so she, although she is certainly an innocent, she doesn't suffer any serious consequences. So the consequences and the reactions are.
I don't know.
Well, I mean, the consequence for you and me of someone becoming a stripper is different than in the world they live in. I mean, survival is survival, I guess. I mean, it's not. I don't view that as a downside. That might
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, maybe he saved her, but I don't know if you could say she wasn't affected by it.
Well,
he explores that with the story, because later on,
but
but what's your point? So the characters don't.
So these terrible consequences that happen, or these extreme circumstances that happen, are always caught by people who are in the game. Right? There's nobody, there's not like there's a guy sitting at the end of the bar who's not involved in anything else who suddenly gets shot in the head. So there's everybody involved everybody plays a part in the outcome that happens to them. And only the people who are characters that we're following, they're the only ones who have specific outcomes that happen to them. So in a Batman comic, there's some bad thing happens to somebody, they're getting beat up in an alley and something bad happens and then Batman has to solve that crime, right? Well, here we don't get introduced to anybody as a victim.
It's all internal affairs, more or less, right?
Right, basically.
Yeah.
It's like the old crime story, we don't mess with civilians. It's only people who are involved in the game who suffer the consequences of that game.
So that's a big distinction. That's important. There's no Joker showing up and gassing an entire studio full of people.
Right.
It's about the infighting and to me,
Well, he's got a series of like organizations that cause conflicts. He's got the Rourke family, which is like a rich family, which I don't know if he goes into detail in the books, but he's got a whole history in his head about how their history, like during the gold rush, they made money and they ran things with the prostitutes, but then the prostitutes broke away and they run them.
Old Town.
What's that?
They formed Old Town, right?
Yeah, Old Town. They run Old Town themselves. And then you got the cops who are corrupted. They're their own, source of trouble. And then you got mafia organizations and then, others and stuff like that. So you've got these different power structures sort of causing tensions. I mean, the story, The Big Fat Kill, that's sort of about that, right? Because you got Jackie Boy, who is a hero cop going to cause trouble with his girlfriend, and he gets rebuffed by Dwight, who sends him packing. So then then Jackie Boy goes to Old Town, ends up getting killed, and that's going to cause like a whole, I don't know if you call it a turf war or what you'd call it, but
it upsets the balance.
Right. It's a potential to upset the balance, and then that story is about maintaining the balance.
Maintaining that balance by playing through. So that's a good example. So Jackie Boy ends up, even though he's this good guy, right, because he's the cop.
Supposedly, we don't see him being good at all.
But he's got got that backstory. So
right. Well, he's got a backstory that we never see. We just know he was a hero cop. He did something heroic.
Right.
But he's like,
we don't necessarily know what it is, but he's involved. And then he goes in and commits this sin, and then he has to face the consequences down the road of him being murdered.
Well, and it plays to the whole concept in American culture of hero worship but in uniform, and it's kind of been downplayed with police for some reason. I happen to like police. The Jackie Boy concept there, I mean, like, he plays into the whole concept where we do hero worship. Like, a fireman can do no wrong. A military man can do no wrong. An officer can do no wrong. And so he starts off with a preconception, this guy's a hero, and we're seeing all the ugly, horrible things he's doing. Right. So we know he's not, but you also know as the reader and as a person in society that, like, the perception of him has to be overcome. And really, The Godfather did that, actually, in 1971, where they shot a police captain, and it's actually a book, too. We don't do crime things on here, but the whole idea was, like, you can't shoot a police officer. The public won't stand for it. Well, no, he's a corrupt officer. You got to show he's corrupt. But again, the perception of police, at least when this was written, is that they're not corrupt. They are the good guys. Now,
in this narrative, most of the policemen are corrupt.
From our vantage point.
No, but I mean, in this story,
that makes it horrible. That creates the horror aspect of it too, the horrible aspect, because the women that have to kill them, they know that, like, the perception, like, they're not.
It's going to be problems.
Yeah, if they killed a pimp, if they killed a mugger, no problem. But you kill a cop, a good cop. And
it upsets the truce.
Yeah, the balance.
But this is some of the first time. This is some of the stuff that changed that in comic books. That's why this book is so important, because it did start to fight against some of those scripted societal norms.
Now, what if you contrast the character of Jackie Boy with one of the other major protagonists in these various books is Hartigan, who is a cop and is actually a sort of straight ahead cop and a good guy. Mm-hmm. He ends up saving Nancy, yeah, from Rourke Jr.
What motivated him to save her, though?
He was a pretty clean crop.
I think he just, remember, like, the whole story is he's on his last day, he's gonna retire, and his partner's kind of like telling him to take it easy, and he's been trying to track down
because his partner's playing the game.
Yeah, his partner's corrupted, but he's basically spending his last day trying to bring Rourke Jr. to justice because he knows Rourke Jr. is doing heinous things to children and all kinds of other stuff. And even though he's literally on his way out of the office, he's literally about to retire, he decides he's going to spend his last day making an effort to save this person. He does, changes her whole life, but then that changes his whole life because they end up framing him, and he gets punished for his act. And then and
he's disgraced, and the whole
yeah. But then he ends up. How does that story end? That's the yellow bastard. Right? That's the yellow bastard. He saves Nancy. Nancy
sends him the letters.
Here's what happened. He feels like he's going to die.
Right.
But he doesn't. He saves her, and then he goes to jail for a crime he didn't commit. They accuse him of being a child molester and hurting her. Mm-hmm. She writes him secretly.
And eventually, he can't tell because he can't tell the truth because they're threatening to kill her.
Yeah, he doesn't want them to know that it's her writing them letters or writing letters to him. Mm-hmm. And eventually, Rourke Jr. recovers from his injuries from Hartigan. A yellow bastard. And they let Hartigan eventually admits to the crime so he can get paroled because he thinks they've found out who Nancy is and they're gonna go after her. And he ends up leading them to Nancy.
Yeah, he goes to protect her, but they follow him because they bait him into that.
Rourke Jr. does, and then he ends up killing Rourke Jr. Right?
Yes.
And then how does Hartigan end?
I think
so. What happens is he tells Nancy, "Go over here, and I'll meet you later." And then he realizes that because he killed Rourke Jr., this is never going to end, and the only way it's going to end is if he kills himself. Right. So the one good guy in this story who's like a pure cop ends up committing suicide.
Right.
Because he's like, this is the only way that I'll save her life, is if I'm out of the picture.
Which ironically doesn't work.
What happens to Nancy eventually?
So it motivates her. She's so mad that he killed himself that she goes off to seek revenge.
Against who?
Rourke Sr.?
I don't remember that.
I could be wrong.
Rourke Sr.?
Yeah,
the father?
Yeah, the father.
What does she do to him?
Don't they break into his house and kill him? Her and Norm?
Thought so.
I can't remember.
No, anyways.
Was that the end of the Yellow Bastard? Was her going after him?
I don't remember which book. It's foggy in my head. Plus, that's definitely the plot of the second movie.
Okay.
And I think it was in the books, but I can't. It's because it's all kind of jumbled in my head. We can probably edit this out.
It's a riveting tale.
You're going to make me sound smart in this podcast, right?
Well, these stories are interesting because they're not chronologically told. Right. They're kind of published out of order, which is kind of cool. It's a series. It's serialized anthology that comes out in comics, and then they were repackaged as paperbacks. But like then when the next volume comes out, it's not necessarily in chronological order. It jumps around, and he also tells like different aspects of past stories in future stories. Mm-hmm. Like you'll see the same scene from a different perspective of different people. Yeah. That was really cool how he weaved it all together.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. I mean, it's a huge tapestry. It's such a rich world and it's a rich environment. And I think, in my opinion, that richness to the world and some of those themes are way more important. The stories themselves tended to get a little tedious for me. Because you're seeing the same, here comes more ultra violence.
I felt like the dialogue patterns got a little bit repetitive at times.
The dialogue eventually it became hard to swallow. But at the same time, it's not really about the dialogue. It's about that bigger picture and creating this very deep world that he put together.
It is a deep world, but the stories are all told from first-person perspective, and they're all very heavy into the character, that they're either about Dwight or Marv or Hartigan, mm-hmm. and you're getting these inner monologues, and sometimes they're providing sort of info dumps for context and backstories, and there's like these, as you know, Bob, sort of like aspects where he explains things, but it also, you really get a sense of these characters, of who they are.
Yep, very rich, and it's weird because he does it without the dialogue. I mean, the dialogue we can agree is not stellar. It's, it's very much like heavy-handed and there's not a whole lot of intricacy to it. But at the same time, you still get a good feel for the character from that dialogue.
Yeah. It's very characterizing. I mean, Wilk, what was your experience reading it?
Reading the whole comic series?
Yeah. I mean, like overall, did you feel like the characters, got repetitive?
I read it over like a 6-week period, I think. I mean, mostly through PDFs that I downloaded, in all honesty, and I really got caught up in the artwork and the overall. Yeah. I mean, to me, the stories weren't complex, and that was relaxing.
Yeah.
Crime isn't that complex, and I just enjoyed it. I mean, it was...
So you never felt it was monotonous?
Not monotonous, no. I mean, like, I guess if there had been twice as much in the same tone, it was a good quantity, I guess. It wasn't really...
Well, you mentioned the illustrations, and these are comics, of course, so that's very important. And Frank was lauded for his innovative use of paneling. And also, I mean, these are black and white comics with occasionally using colors to like accent things. But also, like, there was a lot of use of like negative space. And I mean, the artwork was sort of different. And I mean, like, he could just have like a whole, I mean, I remember reading these comics, like, you can smell the ink. There's so much black ink on the page. Like, I could just, every time I open it up, I could smell it.
Yeah, it's, and
you have a page that's like all black with like a little bit of like white and gray to like accent something.
Yeah, and it's the color with black, to be able to bring out so much emotion in just black and white is incredible. I mean, it's you know how these people feel, and that's really what creates a lot of that emotional depth is just through the artwork. And to be able to connect like that without, and you know, there's a lot of exposition and like you said, the Bob type stuff that's going on where they're explaining this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
But truthfully, the real heart of it comes from that art. The way the city itself, the way it's drawn is really, it moves you. You feel the way that the city's supposed to feel. You know, like when they're in Old Town, you feel that. You can feel the oppression from the girls on the rooftops and how they're looking down at you and how that represents their control. I mean, it's pretty intense.
Yeah. The main characters were Marv, Dwight, and Hartigan. I guess Dwight's probably the main character. You got Marv, and I almost looked at these as like Freudian. I don't know if my analysis really fit, but like Marv is like the id. He's just like very unpredictable. He's medicated. He's all scarred up. He's got a penchant for trench coats and cool cars. He's on a revenge quest. Then you got
fucking
Dwight,
tits everywhere,
who's like more like the ego. He's more disciplined. He's suspicious. He gets plastic surgery, changes his look. He's like a protector. He's driven by guilt. And he goes on like a rescue quest. Then you've got Hartigan, who I thought maybe was like more of like the super ego. And he's more moral. He's got a heart condition. He keeps saying that it's a fair trade for death with an old man for a young girl.
Right. Always bargaining. Always trying to...
Yeah, and Dwight and Marv, they both have this like berserker element to their personalities. And I mean, at some point there is a panel in one of those that is actually a panel from like the Spartans, and it reminds me of like D&D and like berserkers. Like Dwight is more controlled, Marv is not, but they're both they both have like an aspect where they just go nuts and just become like killing machines.
That scene where he kicks the door open on the police that are getting ready to raid a permit, right when he wakes up from when Goldie's dead, and all of a sudden
Marv,
he hears and he hears the police
That's
coming.
the first book, it's like really early on.
And he hears the police coming, and he's like, oh, this is going to be bad. And you're right, it's very much like, I'm just going to kick this door open and blast my way down these stairs like a maniac.
Yeah. There's also a sense in all these stories that things are not always what they seem. You know, Goldie, who inspires Marv to go on his revenge quest, it turns out she's a hooker, and she was like probably just looking for protection. And there's Eva, who was sort of like an evil ex-girlfriend of Dwight. She turns out to be a liar. There's the yellow bastard, who ends up being Rourke Jr. Jackie Boy was the hero cop, which we talked about. There's a story in The Babe Wore Red where Marv runs onto some woman who turns out to be a nun. Nancy, the little girl, turns out to be, she becomes a stripper later. There's a middle-aged man in love with a younger woman that gets tricked. There's the story of the customer's always right, where the customer pays the salesman to kill her. That's what's implied.
Yeah, I think it's looking a lot of rubes who are being fooled and getting the wool pulled over their eyes, which is sort of a piece of that noir that he does so well, where these simpletons are getting fooled by people because they're not.
But they're not always simpletons. Sometimes they're the protagonists.
Yeah, but in that particular role, they're being fooled by these people who are playing different roles. And I think that's a big part of noir in general.
It's almost like as soon as they get something that they think is nice and pure, they find out it's not.
Yeah.
Some of those characters.
Yeah. Anytime you let your guard down and you allow yourself to enjoy something and you're not defending yourself, that's when you lose that whatever it is that you think you were enjoying.
Yeah. What about the character of, is it Manute? I don't know how you pronounce that.
Your guess is mine. It sounds right.
He refers to Eva as a goddess at some point, and he's loyal to her, and then she ends up shooting him, and then he eventually works for the mob. He was kind of an interesting character who kind of came back, and he was almost like a Marv's equal as far as being like just a brute and powerful.
Mm-hmm. He represents sort of that henchman with that loyalty where it ends up not paying off for him. So that's another virtue you would think in loyalty, and it doesn't really do him any good. I mean, he moves from place to place, and he's playing this tough guy role, and he's essentially just a heavy hitter for whoever it is, where he's really just a tool.
Yeah. Do you think that there's, in Sin City, there is an inevitability, a sort of futility to what the characters are striving for? You've got Marv, who wants to avenge Goldie's death, but then, he runs into her sister, who thanks him, but he's eventually executed.
It's not inevitable. I mean,
no.
It's perpetual. There's
But do they do some good? I mean, they die.
No.
Like Hartigan kills himself, but he saves Nancy, right?
Yeah, but there's no greater good being served here. It's a never-ending cycle, and it's a slice of life, for lack of a better phrase.
So is it futile then? Is there other efforts just like futile?
I mean, unless you're building a dam, everything's futile, right? I mean, what the fuck? I mean, we all die, so...
Dams eventually.
Can you say that Hartigan didn't make a difference in Nancy's life? He saved her from Rourke Jr.
Yeah, but she's still gonna die.
She still ended up living a life that she ended up falling into the game, too, becoming a stripper and going off and becoming a killer.
So he saved her from one problem, but she had another problem.
She fell into another. And anybody who strives for anything ends up paying the ultimate price for striving for that.
So Marv wants to avenge Goldie's death, and he ends up getting the electric chair in the end. And he saves all those women from that cannibal Kevin.
Right.
But he dies anyways.
But, yeah, I mean, in the end, what's the best thing that can happen? What's the worst thing that can happen? What happens in between? I mean, it really is. It's an intertwined slice of life showing bad people doing good and bad things, and how it affects the bad people. Really, I don't know. I mean, I don't think there's no greater good. There's no overall goal being served here.
Yeah,
which I guess is what he wanted. He didn't want.
I think so.
Superheroes that were just like always striving to do right. He wanted.
Well, I mean, look at like the Maltese Falcon. Is that Daryl Halfship or whatever the fuck his name is? But like some of the hard-boiled Dashiell Hammett. Thank you. The hard-boiled detective fiction of the 40s and 50s. I mean, it wasn't about World War II. It wasn't about the events of the world. It was about like a very isolated set of events, and it was world building in a chamber. And I think Sin City kind of captures that essence. Where here are these stories right now that we're going to show you. I mean, I'm just interested in what's happening. I don't care about the past and the future. It's what's happening right now, and there's no winning or losing. I mean, they've already kind of lost their Sin City, I guess, for lack of a better phrase. So
it's an interesting way to put it.
So why don't they leave?
Why don't we all leave?
Yeah, I don't know if that's an option. This is a life they know, and they've each found their role in that. And anytime they try to get out of that role, that's when life takes a turn for the left.
I mean, why do you live in and as opposed to Honolulu? Because
there's a very nice motel where you can get some good meth.
Yes. I mean, what choices? I mean, like there's always a better place. There's always a place you can leave to, but you understand and you grow accustomed to the world that you live in. It's familiar. It's nice. I mean,
and I think for these characters, anytime they try for something better, they see something terrible happen, they get struck down.
And they're just surviving too. I mean, they're not really. I mean, there's not a lot of time to wax poetic about, well, what should I do? It's like,
this dude's going to kill me, or I'm going to kill him, and that's just what we have to do.
They're fast-paced stories.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not like should I go to art school in Paris, or should I suck this guy's dick for $20?
I need to buy my baby food, so we're going to be sucking his dick.
So there'll be
stakes
some
are real.
Dick suck tonight. Art school, maybe never.
I had a good point.
The character of Becky, she betrays the girls of Old Town in the big fat kill, and but I guess she gets her comeuppance.
Yep.
Describe what happens to Becky.
She betrays the prostitutes in Old Town, and to tell the mafia about Jackie Boy.
Does she get a timeout, or
so? Then when they take the revenge and they kill all the mafia people, she escapes. But then the salesman, who's like an assassin, comes and finds her.
And what did he do to her, Dave?
I don't think they show, right? Do they?
I believe they cut off her head.
Did he do anything else? I want to know what your imagination says.
Hey, just imagine that she gets horribly mutilated and tortured in every orifice, and that's the idea.
I don't think she would get tortured according to what we've seen of that character. I think he would just kill him. He's an assassin, not a torturer.
Fair enough, I guess.
I feel like Dave probably stretched that out a little bit, though.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I was hoping for some fanfic.
We could definitely get some fanfic.
but we should probably wrap this up.
Yeah, I
And-
think
Fair enough.
we've
Good segue, Dave.
We've
Thank
been
you.
talking for a while. There's a lot of nuances to these stories. Well,
Your face is a nuance.
maybe there isn't a lot of nuances.
No, I think there is, but it's strangely blunt and also nuanced.
Yeah.
The nuance doesn't come where you think it should come. It comes from everywhere else.
You get a very strong sense of character.
Mm-hmm.
You get a very sort of rich world, even though an implication of a big world, even though it's all based around the city and this outskirts of the city. You get a story that, when you read through the multiple volumes, weaves in and out of the main narrative, and you see different perspectives of it, which is very fun and neat.
Yeah.
And then you get interesting and innovative artwork that's noir and a new take.
Yeah.
It's all pluses.
The structure of the narrative is really important to me. That's tough to come by. And if you look at the continuity for the entirety of the story, it's pretty awesome that he was able to create that entire world. I think that if you look at Marvel or DC and the way that they try to maintain continuity with their superhero worlds, they would be envious of the way that he's able to put together this entire
Well, he's one person.
landscape. Yeah.
He's not like a committee voting.
Certainly. But at the same time, it's pretty awesome that he's able to put together this entire world, and you know those characters, and you know the rules.
Well, he's interesting if you think about the fact that he was innovative with property that was not his, with licensed property. He did amazing things with Daredevil, with Batman, and then he's done his own things with his own characters.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if he'd be into Pearl Jam, because I'm really excited to see Pearl Jam tomorrow.
Yes.
They're going to do
a highlight.
Wrigley Field, like a 35
He may or
to
may
40
not be.
song set.
I'm going to guess
40
he's not a
songs.
fan of
What's
Pearl Jam.
one song you want to hear tomorrow, Rob? If you could hear any song by Pearl Jam, what's your...
Well, so personally, I'd like to hear him play Dissidents, but they're probably not gonna play Dissidents. So
You never know.
maybe Elderly Lady Behind the Counter.
Oh, that's a big one. Yeah, that you
they'll
should
play that. Yeah. And then I want to hear Alive and Jeremy in Black,
Oh, those are all probably going to get played, yeah.
probably. But yeah, Dissonance or
Now we get to the real reason why you guys are
yeah,
here.
we're here to see Pearl Jam.
Not to come down
But
to
also
the
for the
podcast.
I would say it's pretty 50-50 for me. I'm
Yeah.
just as excited to
No,
the
I-
podcast as anybody.
Well, why don't we wrap things up with this podcast
right.
episode?
Yeah,
and why don't we
yeah.
go around the horn and give a star rating and any final comments? Wilk, let's go to you first. Out of 5 stars, how many would you give this? And any final comments you have?
I just can't imagine anyone not enjoying these on any level. I mean, it's not Frank Miller's best work, so I can't give it 5 stars, but I give it a
Really?
solid...
What would you say his
Yeah.
best work is?
I'd say the Dark Knight series
Oh, okay.
by far, especially where he did the work he did with Superman, being a complete tool.
yeah,
That's-
that was pretty awesome.
That to me is, I mean, Frank Miller did stuff with the Joker, Superman, Batman that really just kind of forms
transcendent.
my core of creativity, in how he views the world. I love that shit.
All right. So how many stars would you give this work, though?
I would not less than 4, not more than 4.5. So I mean, there's no reason anyone should not read
I'm
this.
going to need you to peg it down.
I go 4.5 stars. I mean, it's pretty spot on. It's pretty perfect. It's enjoyable. It's not. I mean, I found it to be flawless. I didn't find anything wrong with it. It wasn't like the Odyssey. It's not something I'll be talking to my kids about. But I really enjoyed reading it. I wouldn't change much about it. It's kind of my cup of tea. So the reason I'm not giving it 5 stars is I know he's done better work.
Okay.
And but it's, I mean, really, the artwork and the writing is fantastic. And it really, we're not talking about the movie right now, but I love the first film a lot. So
Okay. Rob, what about you? Out of 5 stars, how many would you give it?
I'm going to give it 4.5.
Okay.
I think there's some seminal works that rank above this that are 5-star works, and but it's right there on the cusp. I'm going to say 4.5, and I think there's some. It's 4.5, and it's awesome. I really enjoyed it.
Wow, you guys are really pressuring me here. I was
Give it
take
4.
off
Go
your
do
pants.
No,
Take
I'm-
off your pants.
Jesus.
I'm gonna give it 5 stars.
Okay.
I was actually thinking about downgrading it because I'm like, dialogue sometimes gets repetitive. It feels a little informational, but I was like, like you just said, Wilk, even though you gave it 4.5, I was like, I don't know what else I would have wanted for this except maybe some tweaks on the dialogue, but this is just great to read as it is. And I thought it was really innovative how the stories weaved in and out of each other and then multiple volumes. And I really feel like this is something people should check out for its uniqueness. Now, I'm not a comic book aficionado, but I mean, like Watchmen, like I feel like this is something, if you're into comics or if you're not into comics, you can enjoy this.
Yeah, absolutely. And then noir is perfect.
Yeah.
Well, not to be a cheeseball here, but I watched Who Framed Roger Rabbit last night with my 3 kids and my lovely bride. Sorry to call her bride, Laura. Yeah, but like, I just realized, watch that movie, the work they did to make it like 1940s Hollywood and like
pretty sweet.
Yeah, all the set design and like it kind of like segued into the whole Sin City thing in the comics. I'm like,
yeah,
there's just so much effort that goes into that, and it's a labor of love. And I didn't realize how good a movie Roger Rabbit was until I watched it again as a
pretty awesome
40-some-year-old person. And then Sin City, it's kind of the same thing where he's really just kind of capturing that spirit, and like to capture that spirit in a bottle and a piece of work and kind of put it out there of a certain time period in a certain place. It's hard to do, you know.
Yeah.
So. As an aside, did you say Odyssey on, like an Odyssey on purpose?
Mm-hmm.
So you know Neil Adams wrote a book about his latest Batman. I don't know if it's his latest, but he wrote a series of Batman called Batman Odyssey, which was sort of inspired through Frank Miller, and it forces Batman into a situation where he has to kill or be killed. And it's a pretty good run.
I was referring to the Greek work, the Odyssey.
The Odyssey, right.
Yeah.
Which is...
Also, it's well known, but yeah, I kind of read that. I like all things.
Fair enough.
Yeah, Batman.
Wilk.
Yes, sir.
Your podcast is not going on right now, but is there anything you want to promote?
A couple of things.
The horror page?
Well, I mean, Laura has a Facebook page called Major Horror, which is doing quite well. And we're hoping to release a short film around Christmas about Santa Claus coming back from the dead and avenging his death. And Laura's really pushed me to publish some of my short stories on Amazon. So I'm editing some things I've worked on over the years.
Oh, shit.
And
can I read them?
Good.
Yeah, absolutely. No, so I'm hoping to release a 3-story collection early next year.
Cool.
We'll see how that works.
Also, can we review on a podcast his Santa Claus story?
If it gets turned into a movie.
Sure, we can. Yes, it's well, Sarah wrote the script. It's called Dead Santa, and it's basically Santa gets murdered by his elves, and then they bring him back to life using a nutcracker doll.
How old's your daughter?
She's 5.
She wrote a script called Dead Santa?
Yep.
She's pretty awesome.
Yeah, she's really into
I like it.
Yeah.
I like it.
No, she and Julia both like watching scary things, and they stop. And Sarah's really inspired by a show called Gravity Falls, which is one of the better cartoons
Pretty
that's come out.
Yeah, that's popular.
So she watches that almost religiously, like it's the only show she watches. In all honesty, we might need to get her to a therapist at some point. But I mean,
well, eventually.
No, we actually canceled Hulu for 3 months because she'd only watch Gravity Falls, and we just got Hulu again to watch Castle Rock. And Sarah's like, "Ooh, Hulu's back! Gravity Falls,
Gravity Falls, bitches!"
So she's watched nothing but Gravity Falls for 2 or 3 days.
They were legitimately watching it when I picked them up.
Awesome. Join us next month when we cover the Sin City movies. And until then, you can visit our website at www.nodeodorant.com. You can follow the podcast on iTunes, YouTube, TuneIn Radio, Stitcher, Google Play, all the places you can find podcasts, Apple Podcasts. So write reviews, rate our podcast. We appreciate that. Until then, we will say good night.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.
For more information on the topics discussed in this episode, or to read our show notes and find us on social media, visit nodeodorant.com. For more information on Ryan Sean O'Reilly and his various works of fiction, visit ryanseanoreilly.com. The theme music for this podcast was written by John Doyle from the band I Decline. You can visit him at i-decline.com. Voiceover for this podcast was provided by me, Margaret O'Reilly. Well, that concludes our episode. We hope you've learned a lot. Again, thanks for listening to our show. And always, always remember, there is no deodorant in outer space.
All right, test. That's as loud as I can get it, man.
That's as loud as I can get it.
All right, I'll just have to be quiet.
It's better when you wet it.
Yeah,
what?
We'll keep talking.
How did that? You just took a hard left.
Took a hard left up your butt. I'm full of bad ideas, and I like smut. Can you hear it? He level checks. Just got to keep talking.
Yeah.
Hello.
Hey, Ryan. I just want to tell you tonight I want to hold you in my arms and tell you everything's going to be all right, because you know it's going to be all right. Especially if you're inside of me or I'm inside of you. In fact, I'll do anything you want to not go back to that hotel. I'll crawl across broken glass. I'll be my best behavior.
Jesus.
It was the last minute decision. I'm like, fuck it. No, I'll just... God damn it.
Yeah, dude.
I want to party with you and your Swedish vagina.
What?
Swedish vagina.
Are you saying Swedish?
Swedish.
Swedish?
I want to put Swedish fish inside your vagina.
Swedish fish?
Swedish.
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 Check.
Swedish fish.
Check.
Swedish fish. Yeah. Ironically,
Talk how you guys would normally talk.
well, I found both
Yeah.
of those actually in the pillowcase. Swedish fish and Swisher Swedes.
Yeah, I'm gonna get the most yuppie food tonight. So when they do the autopsy on me, like this guy did not belong in this meth hotel.
There clearly was something wrong.
He had truffles in his belly.
Why did this? There's
Truffles and fine ale.
this is crazy.
I bet
this motherfucker.
I bet he was a lawyer. He didn't belong here. He better got screwed by
Clearly,
Expedia.
there's some foul play.
This will be like a 9-hour podcast.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's going well though.
it's going great.
Yeah, you sleepy?
No, I'm trying to organize my thoughts. No, there's so much to say.
Yeah.
He's really an interesting guy.
You're a saint.
I got to run out of beer before. You can get a blue cheeseburger though. That'll help out.
Yeah, I definitely need.
Get one. I believe. And truffles. They had truffles in this stomach.
They must not have belonged in this meth-filled, flea-bitten motel.
All right, let me hit stop.
That was fun.